What do you remember most about your high school sex ed classes? Was it helpful to your future experiences? Was it mostly swayed by your teacher's opinions on the subject? Did they simply just show you pictures of outcomes of STDs and expect you not to do it after so? My name is Christine Pattillo, and this fall I plan to attend Belmont University as an undergraduate biology student. My passion in the subject lies mostly within the subject of reproductive health. When upon this topic, especially whenever working with high schoolers or teenagers, it's important to think of one major question. Through which strategy, comprehensive, which gives complete medically accurate information on topics such as safe sex practices, contraceptives, the emotional impact of sex, consent, and much more, or abstinence only, which emphasizes the importance of avoiding sexual relations, should the subjects be discussed with teenagers. In a 2019 Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, or CDC study, it was found that 37.6% of females and 39.2% of males between the ages of 15 and 19 engage in sexual intercourse. Within this already large group of sexually active adolescents, it is important to consider the minorities that attribute to that percentage, such as the 9.5% of LGBT youth population in the United States. Through the abstinence-only curriculum, many of these minorities are given insufficient and insignificant education on their sexual health. Though the message is moral at its core, it really does not help them understand themselves better. Abstinence-only sexual education should not be chosen over that of comprehensive sexual education due to its failure of inclusivity, which later leads to a failure of built trust. Abstinence-only sex education falls short in creating a foundation upon which many teenagers can build off of to benefit their own sexual health and relationships. Abstinence-only sex education exposes teenagers only to that of the education of the typical heterosexual man or woman. In a 2019 article discussing this complication within sexual education, Caitlin Baldnar, an undergraduate psychology student, and Samantha L. Tornello, an assistant human development and family studies professor, expounded that sexually minority youth often feel as though some programs villainize same-sex behaviors, ensuring that couples are only assumed to be of a man and a woman. LGBT teenagers are denied chances of understanding their own sexual health through abstinence-only sexual education due to its underlying prejudice. This can be highlighted through the education of STDs, which typically singles out homosexual men. This is a direct repercussion of the HIV epidemic in the late 1980s. As the virus seemed to mainly affect the vulnerable minority of gay men, it gave leeway to uprising homophobia. As seen through these pictures, a lot of the minority had to fight to be heard throughout this crisis. Even now, years after a treatment has been created for HIV, the stigma still stands. It gives the idea that LGBT youth do not deserve to know their own health. In an article highlighting discriminatory sexual education by Delilah Rose Chamlin, a New York law practitioner in 2022, it is explained that due to the inability to discuss sexual health outside of the heterosexual norm, students are simultaneously being sent that there is something inherently wrong with their peers. Hardly any attempt has been made to implement accurate sexual and reproductive health information statistics for these youth through abstinence-only sexual education, creating a large barrier between LGBT teenagers and healthy sexual behaviors. Beyond the exclusion of LGBT community, ingrained stereotypes, as well as misogyny, harms the classic heterosexual couple. These stereotypes all derive from one particular belief, that the male is always dominant in a relationship, inside or outside of sexual relations. Nicole A. Aberland, a senior associate of the Population Council, stated in a 2015 article, studies have found that individuals that adhere to harmful gender attitudes are significantly less likely than those who do not to use contraceptives or condoms. Women who gravitate towards relationships founded by harmful gender norms are significantly more likely to experience sexual health risks such as STDs and unwanted pregnancies. Abstinence-only sexual education fails at avoiding this, as a typical male and female relationship is often depicted in a way in which the male is dominant, and topics such as these and the emotional aspect of sexual practices and consent are not discussed. As a result of the substandard sexual education in the schools, teenagers find it hard to communicate their reproductive health issues. Set up with the belief that sex is something shameful and to be avoided, many do not want to reach out, believing they will be ridiculed or face repercussions for talking about their actions. Distrust in their education leads to more unsafe sex practices, ultimately leading to more health risks such as STIs and unwanted pregnancies. Shamlin stated that fewer than 5% of LGBTQ+ students have health classes that include positive representation of the community in which they belong. Without any positive representation of their own identities, LGBT teenagers lose trust, believing reaching out will only cause them harm. The same can be said for young women. Shelby Estelle, a doctorate student of applied family studies at Kansas State University, found in many abstinence-only sexual education settings that discussions of social consequences of sex often focused on female embarrassment. She delved more into this by explaining that teachers only taught subjects they were comfortable with, excluding things such as yeast infections and periods. This educational method leaves young women to feel speechless in their own bodies, unaware of how to communicate their health needs. Abstinence-only sex education is unable to provide minority adolescents with a foundation of reproductive health knowledge and conviction to address their own health. A comprehensive sexual education curriculum that communicates the basics of sexual relationships, consent, emotions attached to sexual relationships, contraceptives, in an open and inclusive manner, while even perhaps mentioning abstinence only as a desired approach, would be most beneficial to implement in both middle schools and high schools. Through thorough consideration of which sexual education curriculum to provide adolescents, it is obvious which one to choose and why. Please allow teenagers who are often silenced, such as LGBT and women, the opportunity to understand their own health and their own needs. Thank you so much for listening.